Hello, everybody, and welcome. A pleasure to be here with you and absolutely thrilled to be representing Looking Glass Education and be working with their team who are so dedicated and devoted to bringing financial literacy and sound financial education, and specifically the principles of sound money and, of course, the benefits of Bitcoin, therefore, to the world. The nature of this series, they've asked me to come in and do a little series specifically around Train the Trainer to help those of you who may be going out to speak at events or speak to the community, or maybe you're simply speaking at the family barbecue on the weekend. And this is to help you think through what's the best way to phrase this up? What's the best way to say this? What's the best way to deliver it in such a way that it becomes accessible and easy for people to take on board, and comfortable and engaging in such a way that people want to do something about it. They want to go out and perhaps speak to other people about it, perhaps buy their first Bitcoin, perhaps get involved and spread the word further. So I'm thrilled to be able to bring this 4-part series to you that's going to explore the processes of structuring, organizing, and also delivering our presentations and our training, whether that be in a large group environment or whether it's a very casual one-on-one or small group environment. I'm Carolyn Crawford. I have a business called F2F Communications, and I've been doing this work for about 30 years now, specializing in business communications in the form of presentation skills, train the trainer, sales skills, influencing skills, business writing skills, everything in that business communication space. And could not be happier to be doing this for Looking Glass Education. All right, let's get stuck straight into it, and let's have a look at how we're going to go about this process. And to do so, let's go to our first slide. And let's talk about what the purpose, why we're doing this. And of course, this is about helping you to convey new ideas, sometimes difficult ideas, sometimes technically difficult ideas to people who may not be quite so au fait with them. And how do we do that effectively without being condescending, without dumbing down the content? How do we convey something clearly and simply? Because the problem is that knowing our stuff and being able to speak about it fluently with other people who are equally familiar is one thing, but teaching it to other people, knowing how to express that, doesn't always come with the territory of knowing your stuff. So it's a separate skill. And so that's the skill we're going to explore through this video series. There's going to be 4 parts to this. This first video is going to be by far the longest. I did consider splitting it up into 2 parts, but I think there's a certain benefit around having a momentum and some continuity around it. So this first part is around structure and creating a story of logic that's easy for people to understand and to follow that logic. The second part is going to be about how we bring the content to life. How do we make it engaging? How do we make it varied, particularly if we're in a dedicated training session? What kind of exercises can we run? And how do we make it a little bit more involving for people so it's not just dry fact after fact after fact? Session 3, the video 3, is going to be around visual aids and how we make sure they're working for us, not against us. How are they supporting us effectively, helping to guide us, helping to guide the group through the information? And then finally, of course, we'll be getting into our delivery and how do we bring our personality to it, and how do we do that authentically and in a way that makes people feel comfortable rather than put off by the content. The last thing we would want is for them to feel that maybe we were arrogant or condescending in some way, or that we got too complicated too quickly. So how do we do that in such a way that we, as the representation of Bitcoin or whatever content we may be speaking about, are approachable, and therefore the content seems approachable. Okay, so let's get stuck into this issue of structure, creating a story of logic that's easy to understand. And so the objective for this session around structure is to think about so the way we want to think about the objective is, what's our measure of success for the training or for the presentation? Because what I think a lot of people feel around presenting, training, even selling, this actually goes through all business communications, is that we feel like, I've got to look good, I've got to be impressive, I'm representing an organization here, I don't want to let them down, I need to have answers to all the tricky questions, I need to be able to answer them off the cuff straight away such that people have confidence in me. I can't stumble, I can't say I have to be word perfect. And I don't know if you can hear the theme in everything that I've said there, but of course, all of those sentences start with the word I. I've got to look good, I've got to be impressive, I've got to say it smoothly, I've got to remember everything that I need to say, that I want to say, in the right order, without a stumble or a bumble anywhere along the way. And so, of course, all those I-centered sentences make us feel very self-conscious and nervous and anxious. Whereas in fact, this meeting, this conversation is not about me. It's not about us. It's about them. We are there to support them in taking away something that could be useful in their lives, that could help them be more financially safe or secure, or build towards some greater, more predictable growth over time. So this is about them. And the more we go in there with the intention of supporting them to understand, to clarify, to feel good about this, to feel reassured, to have confidence, the more we go in with that intention to really help support and guide and facilitate. I know this always sounds strange coming out of the mouth of a trainer and a presentation skills trainer and a train the trainer, but I actually suggest you drop the language presentation and training from your vocabulary, because they make us feel very stiff. I have to be very professional. I have to put on this newsreader face. And that's not going to be the way that people connect with us and connect with our content and connect with our message. So we want to do this in a way that's very natural, very authentic, and absolutely about them. We don't want to be thinking about us at all during this process. We want our whole and soul focus on them, the audience, whether it's a small group or whether it's a large group. Okay, so with that in the back of our mind, let's explore how we're going to go about this process of putting together the core structure. So that's what we're shooting for. That's what we want to achieve, is getting the message across, conveying the message in such a way that they act on it, and doing so with the intention of focusing on them. 4 ways or 4 elements that we need to explore in order to achieve that. We need to know our audience and tailor our language and our examples and our message for that audience. We need to identify what is the message for that audience. How do I build a structured case to prove that message? And then we're going to explore the issue of the introduction and how do we start strongly and confidently. So let's go for it. Know your audience. So this is about doing a little bit of research before you even put pen to paper, before you've got that blank piece of paper in front of you, or that blank Word document or PowerPoint document in front of you. Before you can even start typing or writing, you need to do a little bit of research about them. We need to know, who are they? What are their roles? What's their business all about, or their organization? What do they already know about this topic, and what do they want to know? What do they need to know? Why are they there? Why are they giving up their time in being there? What do they expect? What do they need? How do they feel about this issue? Do they have a little bit of trepidation? Are they a little bit concerned? What are their concerns? What are their doubts? What are their questions? What are their fears that we're going to have to cover off along the way? What are their drivers and what are their aspirations? What are their hopes and their dreams? How do we tap into their hot buttons and talk to the benefits that are meaningful and relevant for them? What are their lives like generally? They get up in the morning, and what goes on, and what pressures are they facing, and how are they feeling about life? And are there any benefits in what you're going to be speaking about today that could alleviate some of the pressures that are going on in their world? And meanwhile, how do they view you? How do they feel about you? Do they have any prejudices? Are there any concerns they've got about you, about your business, about your organization? Is there anything we're going to have to dismantle in that regard? So get into LinkedIn, get onto Facebook, get onto Google, go and do a little bit of research, get in contact with some people who have worked with them before or might know something about this group or this audience. Find out what you can about them in advance, because the more that you know about them, the more tailored and the more relevant you're going to be able to make it. Okay, so let's move straight on. You've done your research. Let's think about now, we can start with our PowerPoint, with our Word document, with our handwritten, however you like to go about this. And to do this, I'm going to give you a context. I'm going to give you a planner, and I'm going to talk about where the message goes in that planning structure before we talk about how we put the message together. So the planner looks like this, which looks very strange and potentially a little bit overwhelming when you first look at it. We're going to go through this step by step over the course of this session. But all I want to introduce you to in the first instance is this. The order of planning, the way in which we're going to go about the planning process is bottom up, as you can see with this arrow on the side. The planning process, we're going to start with the end in mind, with the conclusion, and work our way up the planner through 5 steps. It's 5 steps in total. I'm going to save one of them to the next video. So we'll be covering 4, including the message in this video. The order of delivery, of course, when we're there live with them on the day, even if it's a casual get-together or whether it's a more formal get-together, is going to be top down. We'll be starting at the beginning and finishing at the end, would you believe? Okay, so how do we write the message which is going at the end? We're writing the conclusion. And to do that, we're going to ask 2 questions, or we're going to answer 2 questions. First of all, what's the action I want this audience to take as a result of the information that I'm giving them today? What do I want them to do as a result of the content? Do I want them to go out and buy some Bitcoin? Do I want them to spread the message? Or do I simply want them to feel, so an action or a thought or a feeling, do I simply want them to feel that it's not scary? Do I want them to, what else could I have them physically doing? Talk with their family and friends about it. I guess that's part of spreading the word. So what's the action? Do I want them, maybe I'm speaking to government and I want them to approve, I want them to pass a law around this, some regulation around this that makes people feel more relaxed and more comfortable around this. So what we're going to do as we go through now, I'm going to ask you to pause the video in a moment, and I'm going to get you to do this as we go. So I'm going to ask you to think about a presentation or a meeting or a training session or even a social gathering you've got coming up. And I want you to think about, if you're going to end up talking about this topic, and let's assume it's Bitcoin because we're here at Looking Glass Education. So let's imagine you're going to be speaking about Bitcoin, and if you're as passionate as I am and the folk at Looking Glass Education, you can't stop yourself. I challenge you to get through a social occasion without mentioning Bitcoin. So the idea here is we're thinking about, what would I really want them to do as a result? I'm not just going to talk aimlessly about this and hope they get swept away with my enthusiasm, because people can get put off by evangelizing. Is that the word? So we want to be able to do it in a way that is meaningful and thoughtful. So what is it that you would like them to think or to do? Take a pause and write it down. What do I really want them to think or to do as a result of the information I'm going to give them about Bitcoin? All right. If you've got that down, I'm hoping you've got that down and you haven't unpaused until such time as you've got down a thought or an action that you want to leave them with. The second part of this now, is that nobody's going to think or do anything you are suggesting unless there's something in it for me. Why should I? What's the benefit? What's the benefit to me in thinking or doing what you are suggesting? Is it going to help me make money, save time, look good, feel secure? Those are the big six. Make money, save time, look good, feel secure. Yeah, so that's about risk aversion at the end there. Minimizing risk, perhaps, is a better way to put it. So in the case of Bitcoin, and depending who you're speaking to at the personal level, of course, it might be about a store of wealth. It might be, if you're a merchant, if you're speaking to people in business, it's about peer-to-peer transactions and the seamlessness and the speed and the lack of third party, the trustlessness of that. If you're speaking to the government, if you're speaking to policymakers, of course, you're speaking about the economic advantages for the long run and the reduction in our time preference, moving towards a low time preference, and what it does over the longer term for our community. Okay. So again, take a pause, please, and write down what you think the benefit, the ultimate benefit, the big picture benefit, not the 15 benefits, but the ultimate picture, big picture benefit for your group. All right, let's kick on. What we're going to do now is take the answers that we've written, the action we want them to take, and the benefit to create this final conclusion, this final message. So we're going to create a sentence that looks a little bit like this. It's a one-sentence message. We're going to try and make it as succinct and as focused and as clear as we can. So it can run something like this. If we take this action, then we, or you, get this benefit, this outcome. Yeah, it can be the other way around. If we want this benefit, then we need to take this action. Doesn't matter which way round. So a very simple example that might get used in business is, if we implement these efficiencies, we'll reduce duplication by 20%. So implementing the efficiencies is the call to action, and then reduction of duplication is, of course, the benefit. Yeah, maybe you're bringing in a new process or new IT or something. Okay, so here's one that I've got about Bitcoin, and I've gone high level. I've gone for, why not shoot big? Let's shoot for the stars. Let's talk the country into adopting Bitcoin. So by adopting Bitcoin, we build an economy on hard money, which allows our people and nation true sovereignty and future wealth. So can you see I've followed the structure there? I've followed the formula. The adopting Bitcoin is the call to action. It's the verb. And now we've got two different audiences in a way that there's benefits. So hard money is a feature, but the benefit is it allows our people and nation. Here we come with the benefit: sovereignty and future wealth. I've gone with two. You can have two, but no more than two, okay? We want to keep it quite simple. We don't want this to flesh out into being a paragraph or 3 sentences long. One sentence. Take a pause the video, write your 1-sentence message. Email it to me. Email it to Looking Glass Education. Get in touch. I want to see it. I want to see what you've come up with. I hope you've got that down. I hope you've paused. And now that you've unpaused, you've written that down. And I hope you've got a sentence you're comfortable with. Make sure, by the way, I should have perhaps said this before you started writing, maybe tweak it. Make sure it's in very plain language, very conversational language. This is your conclusion. You're going to be saying this at the end of the training session, at the end of the presentation. You're going to have gone through a whole lot of stuff. And at the end, it's got to be very easily spoken. You don't want formal, stiff, beautifully written language. You want it to be in a way you can say it. So this one, I feel like I can say, I could have gone through a whole lot of stuff. And then I'm just saying at the end of it, look, at the end of the day, what we're saying is that by adopting Bitcoin, we build an economy on hard money. And that allows our people and nation true sovereignty and future wealth. So I can give it some emphasis, but I want to be able to be very down to earth and natural and conversational in my tone of voice. And I can't do that if my language is too stiff. So if you need to pause again and just go back and tweak the sentence that you've come up with, please do so. The point of what we've done here, though, in writing this sentence before we do anything else, is that we have identified our message, and what this will do is help to focus our thinking as we do the rest of the planning process. Everything else we do is going to work towards this message now. So this is going to focus our thinking, and it will also give them a very tangible takeaway, something to think about, something to do. Okay, let's kick straight on. So we know our audience, we've identified our message. Now we need to build a structured case to support that message. How do we do that? We're working, if you remember, bottom up, and we're doing the planning bottom to top. And of course, when we get to the delivery, which we'll get to shortly, I'll show you how we flow it through from the top down. What we've got at this stage is our very first step, which is the conclusion, of course. And I'm going with this one by adopting Bitcoin, yada, yada, yada. And we're going to use that as our working example as we work our way up to step 2, this ABC over on the left-hand side. Not the same ABC as action plus benefit equals conclusion. This is now just 3 headings we are going to come up with that are like, they're going to become the agenda. They're the 3 overarching issues that we think we need to cover off in order to prove this one sentence message. It doesn't have to be 3. It could be 2. It could be 3, 4, 5. I normally suggest a maximum of 5 because, frankly, if you stand up to a group of people and say, hi, I want to talk about 27 things today, that sounds like a lot, and it can sound overwhelming. Even if you say there's 6 different issues I want to cover, that sounds like a lot. So when we're putting together our agenda, we had a very clear 3-step process for coming up with that one sentence message. We, of course, have an equally scientific process for coming up with the agenda, and it's called off the top of your head. There's no actual one right way of coming up with the agenda. This is the kind of the art and the science of training and presenting. From our one sentence message, we're really thinking off the top of our head. I reckon if that's what I'm shooting towards, I probably need to cover something about this, something about this, something about this, and maybe something about this. 3 or 4 headings that you think will cover it off. When we do these headings, these are just broad signposts. We don't get too specific. I'm going to show you an example in a moment. We don't want to give away too much. We don't want to tell them precisely what we're going to be seeing in this space, because it might put people off. We might be jumping the gun. If we just use a nice broad heading, it's like, oh yeah, we'll be talking about this topic, but you haven't given away yet what you're going to say about it. Okay, so let me give you this example now. And what I've gone with here by adopting Bitcoin, we build an economy, I've suggested that the way we might go about this is we might talk about the problems with fiat first, because we need to sell them on the problem before we start selling them on the solution. So what's the problem? The many problems, the disastrous problems with fiat, how Bitcoin can help, and then, of course, the outcomes we can expect at the individual level, the community level, the economic level, the governmental level, so forth. Okay, good. So take a moment, pause your video and give some thought to your one sentence message and how you can break it down into 2 or 3 or 4 parts, no more than 5. Try and come up with 3 or 4 headings. All right, if you've got that down, let's kick it on. From the agenda headings, the next step we're coming up with is, in effect, 1 key point per agenda heading. What's the major point I want them to take away about the problem with fiat? What's the key point, the ultimate point I want them to take away with how Bitcoin can help? And what's the essential point I want to make about the outcomes we can expect? Yeah. So what's going to happen is you're going to talk about 27 things in relation to each one of these headings. You'll have all these bullet points and all these information. And if it's a training exercise, you're going to be interacting and running brainstorms, and you're going to have them in breakout groups, and you're going to do loads of fun stuff. But what's going to happen here is we need to now boil it down to what is the bottom line message, having gone through all of that stuff that I want them to take away about this section. Short, sharp, bullet point. So we've gone blah, blah, blah about the problems with fiat. And I've suggested that the key point that we want them to take away about the problems with fiat is that corruption and inflation are inevitable. We are then thinking about how Bitcoin can help, and the essential point we want to get across there, I've suggested, this is just my example, is that it's hard money, it's a trustless store of wealth. And finally, in terms of the outcomes we can expect, I've gone with individual and national, sovereignty and stability. So they're quite short, sharp and punchy. And the reason we're doing that in sort of 5 to 7 words maximum, really, if you can, is so that it's very succinct and easy to retain. Really, if they walk away remembering nothing else because they've got a million things on their mind and they're barely listening to a word you say and they can't concentrate, if they remember nothing else, you want them to remember these 3 key points: that corruption and inflation are inevitable with fiat, hard money, Bitcoin is hard money, it's a trustless store of wealth, and that it will give us individual and national sovereignty and stability. Yeah, that's what we want them to remember. So take a moment, get out your planner, and by the way, I'm going to leave a link to this in the course notes. There'll be a link so you can download a copy of this planner, but it's very quick to mock up. If you just want to do it in your own Word document or PowerPoint, you can take a screenshot and see how that's made, and it'll take you 5 minutes to create that yourself, but we'll leave a link anyway. Okay, key takeout points. Give it a go. 5 to 7 words, nice and succinct, short and punchy. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens from here, because frankly, within the space of those first 3 steps, step 1, the conclusion, step 2, the agenda, step 3, the key takeout points, we've fundamentally structured up the entire session, the entire presentation or training session. We're going to copy now. Have a look at this. We're going to copy the A, B, and C down here, the problem with fiat, how Bitcoin can help, and we're going to copy it twice up to something that looks more like where an agenda should be. There's a reason we started down the bottom. I'll get to that. But we're going to copy it up to the top here, problem with fiat, how Bitcoin can help, the outcomes we can expect, and also at the top of these big boxes, the problem with fiat, how Bitcoin can help, the outcomes we can expect. Similarly, where we've got 1, 2, 3 down the side of the key takeout points on the right-hand side of that second bottom box, we've got 1, 2, 3 at the bottom of the big boxes here. Corruption and inflation are inevitable, hard money, individual and national sovereignty, etc. Okay, so I don't know if you're getting a sense of it, but you've now basically structured up the entire thing. And now all you've got to do is populate the data, put in the evidence that proves corruption and inflation are inevitable. Include that information, all of that information, and only that information that proves that Bitcoin is hard money and a trustless store of wealth. And similarly with the outcomes we can expect. So this is the piece we're going to leave until the next video, because it's a pretty chunky piece in its own right. But you, well done, congratulations, have structured your entire training session or presentation. And talking about your stuff is really the easy part. You could probably wing it from here if you really needed to. The hard part actually is the structure and the content. We can all talk about our stuff till the cows come home, but giving it a little bit of focus and a little bit of structure is the more challenging part. And that's why I've gotten you to do this. All right, let's have a little think about how this flows now, top to bottom. Yeah, so remember, we've done the planning bottom up. We've done the conclusion, agenda, key takeout points, copy them up. Let me just give you a very quick demonstration of how this flows top down. We're going to get to the Smart Start in a moment. That's going to be the final part of this video. Oops. But let me show you how the rest of it flows. So it goes like this. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Smart Start, Smart Start. I'm Carolyn, something about me, yada, yada. Okay, go into the agenda. we're going to talk about three things today. Let's talk about the problem with fiat, how Bitcoin can help, and the outcomes we can expect. Now, if you're doing this at a family barbecue, the same thing still works. So you go, look, I don't know really how interested you are in Bitcoin, but I think to understand Bitcoin, you would probably have to go down the track of thinking about what the problems are at the moment with the economy and with money as we know it. And then I can probably talk you through how Bitcoin can help that and what the outcomes of that would be. So you're still giving a little bit of structure. You're also feeling them out to see how far they want to go down this rabbit hole. But you're still giving them a little bit of organization to that. Okay, and then you signpost in to the first section. Let's talk about the problem with fiat. And off you go, rhubarb, 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 everything there is to say about the problems that we are exploring in this space and what the problems multitudinous have been over a period of time, et cetera, et cetera. You might get them involved in brainstorms and exercises along the way. You get down to the bottom of that section. You want to emphasize this first key takeout point. So you're saying something like, in short, the problem with fiat is that corruption and inflation are inevitable. And you pause. Pause is your most powerful tool for emphasizing a key point. So you've gone yada, 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 yada. Take a little pause before. Capture their attention. And you go, fundamentally, let's pull this all together. We've been talking for half an hour already or doing some exercises or doing some other stuff. Let's just wrap this section up. Really what we're saying is that in terms of fiat, corruption and inflation are inevitable. Let's move on. Let's talk about how Bitcoin can help. And off you go, rhubarb, 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 everything there is about Bitcoin. End of the section, emphasize that key takeout point. You might have it on a slide of its own, or you might have it as you can see on my slide here. Yeah, that's my key takeout point down the bottom, build a structured case. I'll deliver it in a moment for you. Okay, so you might have it on a slide. The point is that hard money, that Bitcoin is hard money. It's a trustless store of wealth. Pause. Let's talk about the outcomes we can expect. Yada, yada, yada. Point is, it gives us individual and national sovereignty and stability. This penultimate box, where's my cursor gone? This one, the ABC 1, 2, 3, now becomes our recap. So we now want to summarize basically on a page everything that we have said so far, all the major points we've made so far. So here it goes. Here's what a recap sounds like. Very down to earth in your tone of voice because it's exact repetition and you don't want it to sound condescending. So here we go. We've covered a lot of territory here today. It's been quite an in-depth session. Three things I really want to highlight that I think are most important to take away from this whole thing. In terms of the problem with fiat, corruption and inflation are inevitable. We moved on to talk about how Bitcoin can help and seen that it's hard money. It's a trustless store of wealth. And finally, we've moved on to talk about the outcomes we can expect and seen that it gives us individual and national sovereignty and stability. So it's on that basis. Now you leverage into that final conclusion, your one sentence message that you've been focused on from the beginning of the planning right through now to the end of delivery. And you deliver that, you might blank your screen. Let me tell you, by the way, just as an aside, how to blank the screen. When you're in the full screen of PowerPoint, as we are here, all you have to do is B to blank the screen. Check this out, B, not Control B, not Shift B, nothing, just B, and it blanks the screen. Any key to bring it back on again, or W for white, and then again, any key for back on again. So neat little trick if you want to minimize the distraction of the background and just talk to your audience for a little while. Okay, so the recap, as we said, the problem with fiat, corruption and inflation. How Bitcoin can help, hard money, the outcomes we can expect, individual and national sovereignty and stability, and then we deliver, we might blank the screen with the B button and say, by adopting Bitcoin, we build an economy on hard money, which allows our people and nation true sovereignty and future wealth. Okay, so you've delivered your entire session. Well done. So the whole point of this process of building a structured case to support our message is that it gives you real focus and it gives real organization to it. All right. So let's move on to the final step for this session and for the presentation planning or the trainer session planning. And we're going to look at the opening, the introduction, the opening paragraph. So in effect, step 1 was the conclusion, step 2, the agenda, step 3, the key takeout points. Step 4 is the one we're going to do in the next video, which is populating the data and bringing it to life and adding engaging content. Step 5 is what we call the SMART Start. It's an acronym with up to 6 elements in it. Let's talk about what we might include in that introduction, in our kind of introductory paragraph, the first 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Okay, up to 6 elements. You don't include all 6 every time. You pick and choose what's relevant for that audience on that topic on that day. And you don't necessarily do them in this order. I've just got them in this order because it creates a cute acronym, SMART Start, but you do it in whatever order. Like, for instance, the teaser you can see at the end there at the bottom often comes up top. It's actually the first thing often that we do, but fiddle around with it, have a play. The setup. So let's go through these in turn, is kind of your housekeeping. How's the session going to run? Are there going to be breakout groups? Is there going to be interaction required? If you're doing it online, what are the ground rules? Are you going to be doing polls? Do you want them to have their speakers on or off? Do you want them muted? So how's it all going to take place? Is there going to be a document for them to link to later, or something that they can work through as they go? All of that is set up. Are you taking questions on the run? Let them know how things are going to work. What's the duration? How long is it going to go for? The M stands for me, and that's where you're talking about your credentials, your biography, and your entitlement to speak on the topic. So something about your experience with this subject and why they would trust you to be speaking about this and training them in it. A stands for audience, and it's where you give a comment about the audience to the audience, and it's a rapport builder. It's building connection. It might be thanking them for their input or their cooperation or their involvement. It might be thanking them for, or congratulating them perhaps on something that they've achieved recently, kicking a goal of some sort. It might be, I always enjoy coming and working with this group because I like coming and talking with you because, yeah? So something a little bit personal that connects you to them. Rapport is a matter of planning as much as natural chemistry. We can put a bit of effort into rapport, and a lot of that just comes through the intention of wanting to help. People feel that intention. The R stands for reason, and the reason we are here today, and the reason they should listen, because it may seem like a topic that's either daunting or boring to them. So give them a little bit of a flavor up front as to why they might want to listen today, what's in it for them. So you're starting to allude a little bit to the benefit really in the final conclusion. The T stands for topic or background. This is where you might want to give a bit of context or background, maybe about your own organization, who you're representing, or maybe a little bit of background about, I don't know that you want to get into the whole history of money. That probably belongs into the section about the problems with fiat. But there may be a little bit of background about, you may have heard of this thing called Bitcoin that's been around for X many years. I don't know when you're listening to this video. So you might want to give a little bit of background around that. And a teaser. A teaser is where we might include an interesting quote or a dramatic statistic, something maybe from the Treasurer or from the newspaper that day, a current story, financial story that's meaningful and a classic example of the kinds of problems we can expect from fiat, which is just about everything in the world at the moment. It could be an analogy, a story. It could be a personal story. It could be I was out there weeding the lawn the other day and talking about how or weeding the garden, and they just always grow back. These problems always grow back. And that's always going to be the case as long as we have fiat. I just made that up. So It could be that problems will always just grow back as long as we're using fiat. And you can use that as your story or your analogy. And the beauty about giving away something personal in your story is that people know something about you now. You're a gardener. Great. So now we relate to you as a human being a little bit. Okay, so the whole point here is put a little bit of planning into your Smart Start, because what invariably happens is we put a lot of time and effort into our content and into making it a lively session and into the visual aids and making them look fabulous. And we don't think about the opening. And so we start and we're bumbling and fumbling until we kind of get into the meat of it, and we've lost a bit of confidence and we're on the back foot now, and they don't have confidence in us. So take just a few minutes to plan that opening, to plan that start, and rehearse it out loud a few times at home, alone, in the shower, in the car, wherever it might be. And you will start with confidence and you'll feel comfortable from the beginning. And they'll feel comfortable with you. And you can get on with the business of focusing on the content and conveying it and focusing on them and their ability to understand it and take it on board. Okay. So we start strongly for the sake of rapport and also clarity around what's going to be going on in this session. So let's pull this all together. Recapping it, you know exactly what I'm doing now because I'm following the structure. We talked about knowing your audience so that you can tailor your content for them, identifying your message to focus your thinking and their takeaways. Build a structured case to support that message, and then start strongly with your Smart Start to create rapport, engagement, and clarity. All right. So the bottom line is, in terms of this very first session that we've done, which is about structuring your message and your like a framework for a house, building the foundation and the framework before we add the brickwork and the liveliness, we need to get very clear, focused, and organized so you're free to connect with them fully and guide them to a meaningful takeaway for them. All right. So well done for making it through this first session. Great job. What we're going to do in the next session, as we talked about earlier on, is fleshing out the content and how do we make that varied and interesting and engaging, because this will seem like a very dry topic to a lot of people. So how do we make it interesting for them? And then we'll move on, of course, to in the third session on visual aids, and finally about us and our personal delivery. It's been a pleasure and delight sharing this with you. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All the best for now.